The entire galaxy laughed when the wedding was announced. 3 years later, nobody was laughing. The comments streamed across 1,000 holographic screens at once. They floated above city plazas. They scrolled across orbital stations. They flashed through luxury starliners crossing the outer systems. Some were mocking. Some were cruel. Most were amused. Nathan Walker watched them all from a small waiting chamber beneath the Imperial Palace. He sat alone on a polished metal bench while the glow of distant displays reflected across the floor. A service drone hovered nearby, silently refilling untouched glasses of water. Beyond the chamber walls, millions of spectators were already gathering for the ceremony. The largest royal broadcast in modern galactic history was less than an hour away. Nathan rubbed his hands together and stared at the floor. He was 34 years old, a mining engineer from a frontier colony most people had never heard of. 6 weeks ago, he had been inspecting geothermal reactors on a dust-covered moon nearly 400 light-years away. Now he was preparing to marry the most powerful ruler in known space. The situation still felt absurd. A notification chimed above him. Another wave of public commentary appeared. Nathan glanced up despite himself. Human farmer marries grandmother Empress. This should be entertaining. Another followed. The Empire must be desperate. Then another. I am watching purely for the disaster. Nathan sighed and leaned back against the wall. The palace ventilation system hummed softly overhead. Somewhere in the distance, ceremonial music drifted through enormous corridors. Every sound felt impossibly expensive. Even the air seemed polished. A palace attendant entered carrying a tablet. Her silver uniform shimmered beneath the ceiling lights. "Mr. Walker," she said carefully. "The ceremony preparations remain on schedule." Nathan nodded. "That is good." The attendant hesitated. "Are you nervous?" Nathan laughed quietly. "Does it show?" "Only slightly." "Then I am doing better than expected." She smiled politely before leaving. Silence returned. Nathan stood and walked toward a massive window overlooking the capital city. The view stole his breath every time. Towers of glass and luminous crystal stretched for miles beneath a sky crowded with traffic lanes and orbital elevators. Above them all floated the Imperial Palace itself, suspended by technologies Nathan only partially understood. Thousands of ships circled in organized patterns beyond the atmosphere. Every one of them was here to witness history. Or a mistake, depending on who was asked. Nathan stared at the distant horizon. Somewhere above those clouds lived a woman he had never expected to meet. Empress Veilora, ruler of the Celestian Empire, sovereign of hundreds of worlds. According to the public, she was old, cold, untouchable. According to the news networks, this marriage was nothing more than political theater. According to nearly everyone in the galaxy, it would fail. A low tone echoed through the chamber. The palace announcement system activated. All participants report to ceremonial positions. Nathan exhaled slowly. The moment had arrived. Outside, billions waited to watch a human nobody marry an aging alien empress. What none of them knew was that the strangest part of the story had not happened yet. Nathan Walker had imagined many futures during his life. None of them involved standing beneath a ceiling 200 feet high while ambassadors from 300 worlds watched his every movement. The ceremonial corridor stretched before him like a river of light. Polished silver flooring reflected towering columns lined with floating crystal lanterns. Every few seconds another camera drone drifted silently overhead, broadcasting the event to billions. Nathan adjusted the collar of his formal suit and immediately regretted it. The fabric probably cost more than his old frontier apartment. A palace attendant walked beside him at a measured pace. Neither spoke. There was nothing useful left to say. Ahead, enormous doors slowly opened. A wave of sound rolled through the corridor. Applause. Music. Voices. Nathan stepped into the grand hall and nearly stopped walking. The room was impossible. Terraces rose hundreds of feet into the air. Thousands of guests filled the galleries. Representatives from dozens of species occupied private observation platforms suspended by invisible fields. Holographic constellations drifted across the ceiling. Entire galaxies rotated above the audience in shimmering blue light. Nathan suddenly understood why people called this the center of civilization. It looked less like a building and more like a dream someone with unlimited resources had decided to construct. Another burst of applause echoed through the chamber. Nathan realized people were looking at him. Specifically him. The human engineer from a mining colony nobody could find on most star charts. He resisted the urge to turn around and check whether somebody more important had entered behind him. A giant display screen activated overhead. Public commentary continued scrolling across its lower edge. Some messages were supportive. Most were not. He caught one that read, "He looks terrified." Another replied, "I would be too." Nathan could not entirely disagree. The music changed. Softer now. Slower. The crowd gradually fell silent. Every eye in the hall shifted toward the far end of the chamber. Nathan followed their gaze. A second set of doors opened. For a moment nobody moved. Then Empress Veilora appeared. The reaction was immediate. Thousands of guests rose to their feet. Nathan found himself staring. Not because she was an empress. Not because she ruled half the known galaxy. Because she looked nothing like the person described by the news networks. The reports had portrayed her as ancient. Frail. Near the end of her reign, the woman entering the hall carried herself with quiet authority. Her blue skin reflected the soft glow of the chamber lights. Silver strands ran through her golden hair. Her violet eyes remained calm despite the attention surrounding her. She moved without hurry, without uncertainty, without needing anyone's approval. Yet something about her expression surprised Nathan. Beneath the dignity, beneath the confidence, he saw exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion. The deeper kind. The kind carried by people who had been responsible for too much for too long. The crowd saw an empress. Nathan saw someone tired. Their eyes met briefly across the enormous hall. Something unexpected happened. Veilora looked away first. And in that small moment, Nathan felt the first crack appear in the story the entire galaxy thought it understood. Nathan did not hear the rest of the ceremony. The moment his eyes met Veilora's, his mind drifted back 3 weeks. Back before the palace. Before the broadcasts. Before half the galaxy learned his name. At the time, he had been standing ankle-deep in red dust beneath a geothermal reactor on Kestrel 9. The colony sat on the edge of explored space, a place better known for equipment failures than political importance. Nathan preferred it that way. The reactor's cooling system had malfunctioned again. Steam hissed from fractured pipes while maintenance drones circled overhead. It was a normal day. Then an Imperial shuttle landed. Even before the engines powered down, everyone on site stopped working. Nobody from the Empire visited Kestrel 9 without a reason. Nathan remembered wiping grease from his hands as 3 officials emerged from the vessel. Their uniforms gleamed beneath the harsh sunlight. The lead official carried a data tablet sealed with the Imperial crest. Nathan assumed there had been a mistake. He assumed they were looking for someone else. 5 minutes later, he learned they were not. "Nathan Walker," the official said. "You have been selected." Nathan stared at him. For what? A state marriage initiative authorized by the Imperial Council. Nathan blinked once. Then twice. "I am sorry." "A what?" The official remained perfectly serious. "You have been chosen as a candidate for marriage to Her Imperial Majesty." The workers nearby tried very hard not to laugh. Nathan almost joined them. "That is funny. This is not a joke." The official handed him the tablet. Nathan scanned the document. The words remained exactly as absurd the second time he read them. Imperial Marriage Accord. Political Stabilization Directive. Human Representative Selection. He looked back up. "You people realize I fix reactors for a living, right?" "Yes." "And you are aware there are approximately 8 billion humans more qualified than me?" "Also yes." Nathan closed the tablet and handed it back. Then somebody made a mistake. But nobody had. Over the next hour, explanations followed. Alliances were weakening. Several member systems demanded greater human representation within imperial leadership. Advisors proposed a symbolic union. Extensive compatibility analysis had been conducted. Thousands of candidates had been reviewed. Somehow, impossibly, Nathan's name had reached the final list. "Why me?" he asked again. The official finally hesitated. "According to the review board, you possess unusually high scores in conflict resolution, adaptability, and empathy." Nathan laughed. "That sounds like a polite way of saying I stay out of trouble." "Perhaps." The shuttle waited nearby. Its engines emitted a low hum beneath the afternoon sun. Nathan looked across the colony one last time. The reactor, the dust, the familiar routine. Everything suddenly felt fragile, temporary, as though his old life had already started disappearing. "Do I have a choice?" he asked quietly. The officials exchanged a brief glance. Then the lead representative answered with complete honesty. "Not really." Nathan remembered staring at the horizon after that. The sky seemed larger than usual. The silence lasted several seconds. Finally he sighed. "Well," he muttered, This is going to be a disaster. What he did not know then was that the disaster everyone expected would become something entirely different. The wedding itself passed like a blur of light and ceremony. Nathan remembered standing beneath a floating ring of crystal stars, while representatives from hundreds of worlds watched in silence. Ancient vows were spoken in languages older than human civilization. Holographic constellations drifted overhead. Music echoed through the vast chamber like distant sunlight. Yet the moment Nathan remembered most clearly came afterward. Not during the ceremony. Not during the celebrations. It happened hours later. The reception occupied nearly half the imperial palace. Thousands of guests attended. Diplomats exchanged carefully rehearsed smiles. Nobles discussed trade routes and political alliances. Cameras followed every movement. Nathan spent most of the evening feeling like a misplaced maintenance worker who had accidentally wandered into the wrong building. Everywhere he looked, people seemed more important than he was. By midnight, the final speeches ended. The music softened. The guests gradually disappeared into private wings and orbital transports. For the first time all day, silence returned. Nathan finally escaped onto a balcony overlooking the capital city. Cool night air drifted across the palace. Below him, millions of lights stretched toward the horizon. Traffic lanes glowed between skyscrapers like rivers of gold. The city seemed endless. He rested both hands on the railing and exhaled. "You look disappointed." Nathan nearly jumped. He turned. Veilora stood several feet away. Gone were the ceremonial robes and jeweled ornaments. Gone was the public performance. She wore a simple dark gown now. No crown. No attendants. No cameras. Just a woman standing beneath the stars. Nathan rubbed the back of his neck. "Sorry, I did not hear you. Most people do not." Her voice carried a quiet amusement. They stood in silence for several seconds. The city lights reflected faintly in her violet eyes. Nathan realized this was the first time they had been truly alone. "I am not disappointed," he said eventually. "Just overwhelmed." "Understandable." She stepped closer to the balcony. "Your life changed rather suddenly." Nathan laughed softly. That might be the understatement of the century. To his surprise, Veilora smiled. A small smile. Brief. Real. It transformed her face completely. For the first time, she seemed less like a ruler and more like a person. The moment vanished almost immediately. "You expected someone different," she said. Nathan hesitated. Honesty felt dangerous. A little. Older. The news networks were not subtle. Another smile appeared. They rarely are. The wind carried distant music from somewhere deep within the palace. Nathan looked toward the city below. "Can I ask you something?" "You may." "Why me?" The question lingered between them. Veilora studied the horizon before answering. Everyone else asked what the Empire needed. Her gaze shifted toward him. "You were the first candidate who asked what the Empire lacked." Nathan frowned slightly. "And what does it lack?" For a moment something sad crossed her expression. Not weakness. Not regret. Loneliness. People willing to tell the truth. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath them. Nathan looked at the woman beside him. The most powerful ruler in the galaxy. The woman everyone feared. The woman everyone mocked. And suddenly he realized something. She looked tired because she had been carrying an empire for decades. Alone. The thought stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Because for the first time, Nathan stopped seeing an empress and started seeing a person. Nathan began noticing the emptiness a few days later. At first it appeared in small ways. The Imperial Palace employed more than 20,000 staff members. Hundreds of advisors moved through its halls. Delegations arrived hourly from distant worlds. Entire departments operated around the clock to manage the affairs of the empire. Yet somehow Veilora always seemed alone. One morning Nathan wandered into a garden suspended nearly a mile above the city. Artificial sunlight filtered through transparent domes. Crystal streams wound between silver trees whose leaves shimmered with faint bioluminescent patterns. The garden was beautiful, perfect even, and completely empty except for one person. Veilora sat beside the water reading reports from a floating display. Nathan glanced around. "This place is huge." "It is." "Nobody else comes here?" "Not often." Nathan sat on a nearby bench. The stream produced a soft mechanical murmur as filtration systems circulated water through hidden channels. Far below, the capital stretched toward the horizon beneath morning clouds. "Seems like a waste," he said. Veilora lowered the display slightly. "The garden. The view." For a second, she looked confused. Then she followed his gaze toward the city. I see it every day. That does not mean you stop appreciating it. The comment earned a thoughtful silence. Later that afternoon, Nathan accompanied her through several official meetings. He noticed a pattern. Advisors spoke carefully. Ministers chose every word with extreme precision. Diplomats treated her less like a person and more like a force of nature that might alter the course of history if approached incorrectly. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody disagreed with her openly. Nobody joked with her. By evening, Nathan understood why. Veolora had ruled for more than 4 decades. Entire generations had grown up viewing her as an institution rather than an individual. Respect had slowly transformed into distance. Distance had become isolation. That realization stayed with him. Several nights later, Nathan found himself wandering through the palace kitchens after failing to sleep. The enormous room stretched across nearly half an acre. Automated systems prepared meals for thousands of residents. Most stations were inactive at that hour. Only a handful of cooks remained on duty. Nathan spotted a tray of fresh pastries and poured himself coffee. Then he noticed someone standing near a window. Veolora. She held a cup of tea and stared into the darkness beyond the glass. Neither spoke immediately. The city lights glowed beneath low clouds. You cannot sleep either? Nathan asked. Not tonight. He took a sip of coffee. Back on Kestrel 9, I used to fix reactor pumps when I could not sleep. That sounds less peaceful. You would be surprised. A faint smile touched her lips. They stood quietly for a while. Then Nathan looked around the enormous kitchen. Empty tables stretched in every direction. Hundreds of seats. Hundreds. How many people usually eat here? He asked. Several hundred during official events. And tonight? Veolora glanced across the room. Only us. Nathan nodded slowly. Somehow that answer felt heavier than any political briefing. The most powerful woman in the galaxy possessed fleets, armies, palaces, and worlds beyond counting. Yet at that moment, she stood alone in a room built for hundreds. And for the first time, Nathan realized the crown was not protecting her from loneliness. It might actually be causing it. The first time Veolora laughed without immediately apologizing for it happened during dinner. Nathan almost missed the moment. The evening itself seemed ordinary, at least by palace standards. No ambassadors, no military briefings, no ceremonial obligations. Just a small dining room overlooking the western side of the capital. Rain drifted softly across the enormous windows while thousands of city lights shimmered below. The table could have seated 30 people comfortably. Only 2 places were occupied. Nathan arrived carrying a small metal container borrowed from the palace kitchens. Veolora looked up from a stack of reports. What is that? An experiment? That does not sound reassuring. Nathan set the container on the table and opened it. The smell filled the room immediately. Fresh bread, melted cheese, roasted vegetables. Nothing elegant, nothing royal, just food. Veolora stared at it. You requested this? I made it. Her expression suggested this information somehow made the situation more suspicious. Nathan sat down. Back home we call it comfort food. Because it comforts people? Exactly. Veolora examined the meal as though it might contain hidden diplomatic consequences. Eventually she sampled a small bite. Nathan watched carefully. The silence stretched several seconds. Then her eyes widened slightly. That is surprisingly good. Nathan pointed at her. You sounded shocked. I was. That is rude. For a moment, she simply looked at him. Then the corners of her mouth moved upward. The smile became a laugh. Soft at first. Genuine. Unforced. Nathan froze. Not because the sound was unusual. Because it was not. It sounded completely normal. Human, almost. The kind of laugh that belonged in kitchens and living rooms rather than imperial ceremonies. Veolora noticed his expression and immediately became self-conscious. What? Nathan shook his head. Nothing. You are staring. I am just realizing something. Which is? He leaned back in his chair. Every public recording I have ever seen of you makes you look terrifying. Veolora sighed. That was intentional. Well, somebody should update the marketing department. Another laugh escaped before she could stop it. This time she did not apologize. Rain continued sliding down the windows. The city glowed beyond the glass. The reports remained forgotten beside her plate. Hours passed more quickly than either expected. They spoke about trivial things. Nathan described life on frontier colonies. Reactor failures. Dust storms. Broken equipment. Veolora shared stories from worlds he had never heard of. Strange customs. Ancient traditions. Absurd diplomatic misunderstandings. For the first time since arriving at the palace, Nathan stopped thinking of her as an empress altogether. She became simply Veilora, a woman carrying too many responsibilities. A woman who remembered thousands of names, but rarely heard her own spoken casually. Eventually, the meal ended. The rain stopped. The city lights reflected across the glass like distant stars. Veilora looked toward the skyline. I had forgotten what this feels like. Nathan frowned. What? Her answer came quietly. A conversation where nobody wants something from me. The room fell silent again. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind that appears when truth enters a room and everyone recognizes it. Nathan looked at her for several seconds. Then he simply nodded. Because for once, there was nothing clever to say. And somehow that seemed to matter more than any speech. The trouble began quietly. Nathan learned that most disasters inside an empire did. There were no alarms. No emergency broadcasts. No fleets gathering above the capital. Only whispers. Small conversations that stopped whenever he entered a room. Advisors who suddenly became careful with their words. Courtiers who smiled too politely. Nathan noticed the pattern long before anyone explained it. One afternoon, he stood beside a panoramic window in the administrative wing while waiting for Veilora to finish a council meeting. Rain drifted across the city beyond the glass. Cargo traffic moved between towers below. Everything appeared normal. Yet the atmosphere inside the palace felt different. Tense. A palace aide hurried past carrying a stack of reports. Another followed. Then another. Nathan watched them disappear into the council chamber. The doors remained closed for nearly 4 hours. When they finally opened, officials emerged looking exhausted. Veilora followed last. The moment she stepped into the corridor, Nathan knew something was wrong. Not because she looked angry. She looked tired. More tired than usual. The kind of exhaustion that settled behind the eyes. Bad day? He asked gently. Veilora managed a faint smile. An excellent observation. They began walking through the corridor together. Golden light reflected from polished walls. Security drones floated silently overhead. Want to talk about it? Nathan asked. Several noble houses are unhappy. That narrows it down to approximately all of them. To his surprise, she laughed softly. The sound disappeared almost immediately. Some believe the empire is changing too quickly, and some believe it is not changing fast enough. Exactly. Nathan shoved his hands into his pockets. Sounds familiar. Human politics? Human everything. They continued walking. Eventually, Veilora stopped beside an enormous observation balcony overlooking the city. Wind drifted through the open archways. Far below, lights stretched toward the horizon. They do not trust you, she said quietly. Nathan blinked. The nobles. She nodded. Many believe you are unworthy of your position. That is fair. Veilora turned toward him. You are not offended? Nathan shrugged. 3 months ago, I was fixing geothermal pumps. Now I live in a floating palace. Honestly, I understand their confusion. For a moment, she simply stared at him. Then she shook her head. Most people would be angry. Most people probably wanted this job. The answer earned another small smile. Yet the concern remained in her eyes. Nathan noticed. What are you really worried about? He asked. Silence lingered between them. Finally, Veilora looked back toward the city. I have spent decades learning how to survive political attacks directed at me. Her voice remained calm. I am less comfortable when they are directed at someone else. Nathan understood immediately. The criticism was no longer aimed solely at the Empress. It had found a new target. Him. The realization should have frightened him. Strangely, it did not. He looked across the skyline glowing beneath evening clouds. Then he looked at Veilora. You know what I think? What? I think people become nervous when somebody breaks a story they were comfortable believing. And what story is that? Nathan smiled slightly. The one where nobody in this palace actually cares about each other. For the first time all day, Veilora's expression softened completely. Yet neither of them noticed the figure standing in the shadows at the far end of the balcony. Watching, listening, and already planning how to use the growing unrest against them both. The formal challenge was announced 12 days later. Nathan learned about it the same way everyone else did. Through a public broadcast. He was eating breakfast in a quiet courtyard when every screen in the palace suddenly activated. Conversation stopped. Servants paused mid-step. Advisors looked up from their tablets. A silver-haired noble appeared on the display. Lord Sarek of House Valen, one of the oldest and most influential families in the empire. His expression remained calm, respectful, dangerous. For the stability of the realm, he declared. The Imperial Council will convene a review of succession authority and marital legitimacy. Nathan lowered his coffee cup. Across the courtyard, several officials immediately avoided eye contact. That was never a good sign. Minutes later, he found Vealora in her private office. The room overlooked the eastern skyline. Rain clouds drifted between towers. Hundreds of data displays floated around her desk. She looked tired before he even entered. "I am guessing this is bad," Nathan said. "That depends on your definition. Mine usually involves politicians smiling while causing problems." Vealora almost smiled. "Then yes." Nathan stepped closer. "What exactly are they doing?" She deactivated several displays with a wave of her hand. "They cannot challenge the marriage directly. So they found another route. They always do. The review would be public. Every major world would watch. Noble houses intended to argue that Nathan lacked the experience, status, and qualifications necessary to stand beside the imperial throne. Officially, the hearing concerned governance standards. Unofficially, it was an attempt to embarrass him until public pressure forced him aside. Nathan listened quietly. Then he surprised her. "That is all." Vealora blinked. "That is all. I thought somebody blew up a moon or something." For several seconds, she simply stared at him. "Nathan, I am serious." He sat in a nearby chair. "I already know I am not qualified. You are not helping. Neither are they." The answer finally earned a laugh. Small, brief, but real. The sound faded quickly. Concern returned to her eyes. "They will not be attacking your abilities," she said softly. "They will be attacking your worth." The room grew quiet. Rain tapped gently against the glass. Traffic lights moved through distant clouds beyond the city. Nathan looked out the window for a long moment before responding. "That only works if I believe them." Vealora's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Surprise. Perhaps admiration. "Most people spend their lives trying to prove they deserve respect," she said. Nathan shrugged. "Maybe that is why most people are exhausted." The silence that followed felt different. Warmer. More personal. Vealora turned away from the window and looked directly at him. "Why are you not afraid?" Nathan thought about the question carefully. Then he gave the most honest answer he could. "Because when I arrived here, I thought I was marrying an empress." He met her eyes. "Now I know I am defending a friend." For a moment, neither spoke. The city continued moving beneath the rain. Traffic flowed. Lights glowed. Somewhere beyond the palace, powerful families prepared their arguments. But inside that office, something shifted. And for the first time since the challenge began, Vealora looked less worried. Which was fortunate, because neither of them yet understood how many people would be watching when Nathan finally stood before the entire empire. The hearing took place beneath a dome so large it could have enclosed an entire city. Representatives from every major world filled the circular chamber. Floating galleries stretched upward into the shadows. Holographic displays hovered above the audience, carrying the proceedings to billions across the empire. Nathan stood at the center beside Vealora while Lord Sarek and the other noble leaders occupied a raised platform opposite them. The atmosphere felt strangely familiar. Not because Nathan belonged there, because he had seen versions of this his entire life. Different people, different stakes. The same question: does this person deserve to stand here? One by one, the nobles presented their arguments. Nathan lacked noble lineage. Nathan lacked political experience. Nathan lacked military accomplishments. Nathan lacked status. The accusations continued for hours. Everything remained perfectly polite, perfectly civilized. Yet the message never changed. He did not belong. Nathan listened quietly. When the final speaker finished, the chamber fell silent. Thousands of eyes turned toward him. Somewhere in the distance, cameras adjusted position. Nathan looked around the enormous room. Then he surprised everyone. He smiled. "You know," he began, "most of what you said is true." A ripple of confusion spread through the audience. Lord Sarek frowned. Nathan continued. "I am not a noble. I am not a politician. I do not command fleets. I spent most of my life repairing machines that broke in places nobody cared about." The chamber remained silent. And honestly, if this discussion is about qualifications, I probably lose. Several nobles exchanged satisfied looks. Then Nathan turned toward Vealora. "But I think everyone here is asking the wrong question." The smiles disappeared. Nathan looked back at the council. "You keep asking whether I deserve her." His voice remained calm, steady. "Nobody seems interested in asking what she deserves." Silence deepened. Even the distant galleries became still. Nathan continued. "I arrived here believing I was part of a political arrangement. I expected power, ceremony, strategy. He glanced toward Veolora. What I found was a person carrying the weight of an entire civilization almost completely alone. Several members of the audience lowered their eyes. Nathan noticed. You call her strong, wise, unshakable. His gaze swept across the chamber. But when was the last time any of you asked whether she was happy? No one answered. The question hung over the room like gravity. For decades, she gave everything to this empire. Nathan's voice softened. The least this empire could do is remember she is a person. Complete silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. Applause. One person, then another, then dozens, hundreds. The sound spread through the chamber until it echoed beneath the massive dome. Nathan turned toward Veolora. Her violet eyes shimmered beneath the lights. Not with sadness, not with exhaustion. Something else, something lighter. Years later, historians would argue about what transformed the empire. Some credited economic reforms. Others pointed to diplomatic treaties. But people who had been present that day remembered something different. They remembered the moment a human engineer stood before the galaxy and reminded everyone that dignity mattered more than status. And they remembered what happened afterward. For the first time in more than 40 years, Empress Veolora smiled, without carrying the weight of the stars alone. The galaxy had expected a political disaster. Instead, it witnessed the beginning of its most peaceful age.